I'm gonna call the meeting to order. First order of business, attendance.
Corey,
Oh, here. I was ready to go first.
Ellis,
Here.
Malone.
Here.
Tell me if I pronounce this wrong.
Easy.
Easy, okay, here, thank you. Hart,
Here.
Fellows, here.
Excellent. Up next, the minutes from the December 11th, 2024 meeting. Everybody's had a chance to take a look at the minutes. Could we get a motion to approve them?
Move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Cody. Second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I should abstain because I wasn't here for that meeting.
Any opposed? Minutes passed. Item number B. Those be numbering in letters. 2024 impact fee financial report from Travis. Travis, let me say before we begin, this is a great report. I'm very happy to look at this one.
Yeah, it seemed like it was all the stuff that Corbin that you'd asked for in an email like back in.
Michael.
Oh, was it Michael? Okay. So I think it sent out everything that you all need, but if there's certain specific follow-up items that you all need, again, just let me know. You know, the overall theme was collections were pretty good. They were above budget. They were above last year, both by significant margins. You know, as it says there, it's 6% above actuals for the prior year, but then if you look at it relative to budget, it was something more prepared, but you know, 127, so 27% above budget. And one of the things we'll talk about more as we get into some of the subsequent slides is that was really driven by commercial permits, because if you look at parks, they were below budget. Police and fire were rough numbers 2x, and that's Micron. And so without that, it would have been a much more smaller year in terms of collection, just overall development. And again, I'll get into more of this in a bit, but the big trend was we saw a big pickup in the last 3 years for multifamily permitting, and then that just dropped off a cliff this year. Which I think from what I've heard in the development community, for obviously to you, is that a lot of that's interest rate driven. So not only working through the backlog, but maybe being a little bit more hesitant on new projects just because of the rates involved. But back to the slides. So the budget was set at 6. Again, we came in at 7.6, 27% above budget. And again, like, I didn't capture in my forecast the discrepancy between commercial and residential permits. You know, but that said, although multifamily fell off a cliff, single family did continue to go all right as one would expect. Oddly enough, it appears to be a little bit less interest rate sensitive.
Because inventory is so low.
Right, yeah, I think it's more supply demand than anything else, right?
Just a specific market. Right, we do not see that in other cities. Correct.
So the 25 budget is set a little bit above last year's, but it's still below where we ended the year, and that's because it's always difficult at this time in the year to forecast what's going to happen next year, because we're only 4 months in. Revenues
It's winter.
Yeah, it's winter. It tends to be very seasonal, and so it's like, all right, well, the big months are yet ahead of us, and I'm not that good at forecasting, I guess. What it comes down to. But the good news is it looks like, and I'll get into this a little bit more later on again, but with all the kind of changes in federal funding, Micron's been pulling back a little bit.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
And so that's, again, what drove 2024 and has driven 2025 year to date. And so, you know, we don't have a track record to see like, are we still going to see permits coming forward in February and March, now that kind of the environment's changed. And, you know, some of these, you know, are they gonna continue to pull the permits? Like, they might have already applied for them, but is it just one of those things where they put them on ice for a little while and see what happens? And so I think we'll have a better view, you know, probably come summertime, but that's unfortunately too late to set the budget. So I'll be thinking more about where to set that later, and obviously happy to get feedback from all of you on what you think's appropriate.
Yes.
So when it comes to Micron, obviously it wasn't forecasted too much in FY '24 either.
Right.
What was the reason for that? Was it just hard to guess when they would start building?
Part of it, and honestly, it's the based on the plan that we did in 2022, the way that I assume the fees are gonna work is, all right, well, what do we think the aggregate target's gonna be? And again, like, we weren't seeing the Micron permits flow through.
Yeah, chips wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's one of those things where, you know, everything was still being figured out, and, you know, so I felt very comfortable setting it above the prior year. But, you know, did I feel comfortable going up to 7 or 7.5, which would have proved prudent, but, you know, and that's why for next year, it's also a little bit tricky, because I could make a strong argument for setting the budget at 8. And maybe that's about where we'll sort out, but again, like, so much depends over what happens over the next couple of months that we might have to refine that a little bit.
Travis,
Yes,
do we know how far along Micron is in terms of their impact fee payments? And how much more could we really expect out of this project?
in terms of impact fees, I don't know, but planning actually has, and I can get it out to the group after this. I don't have the stat handy, but they have a tracking of like the Micron backlog, effectively like the business that they're expecting and forecasting. And last I remember looking, it was still 300-ish billion of valuation.
Just still to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
300 billion?
Oh, I'm sorry, 3 billion, sorry,
Okay.
sorry, I was,
Even still.
it was, I think it was like 2.7 or 2.8 was like, I think the precise number, yeah, 300, that would be,
Yeah.
My brain was still processing
Yeah, we're
that.
getting a couple more zeros on here.
yeah, so,
The total chips, what, 6?
I can't remember.
I think the total investment was like 15.9 or something like that. I don't know, you might have influenced me with your 16
I know, yeah, I
guess,
thought we had a lot of
That's the right
conversations in
ballpark.
Boise State about it. We never saw one. Dream big.
Those are good dreams though.
Yeah.
Sorry, Travis.
Oh, no problem. And so this just kind of puts in graphical form, you know, what's happening on the residential permit side. You can see that there was a big drop off. You can also see, although it's a little bit hard to tell, that single family is not that far off of where we were during this decade here. You know, much like multifamily, it went up a little bit and it's come down.
COVID.
Like,
Yeah.
was that
COVID,
right?
I mean, all the data that I look at from the single family real estate side is that we were leveling out in 2019.
Oh, so the
And-
increase in 2021.
2020, 2021 is from COVID. And now and then 2022 is a decrease due to the increase in interest rates. And then now we're kind of leveling off where we roughly would have been had COVID not happened and everybody decided to move here.
Got it.
Once they could work from anywhere.
Right. For a while.
For a while, I have several clients who've been called back.
Yeah, one person up the street from me that happened to him.
My husband.
Back to the office. At least he didn't move somewhere else.
Well, all his employees still.
Oh, I see.
And they just got the notice this morning.
Wow.
So it's like- I digress.
One other thing to note on this, and it's, you know, not different than what you were saying, is that, you know, if you look at the trend up until 2019, 2020, you know, is about 1,300 permits a year on the residential front, and then it jumped to 1,700 for the last couple of years, and that even includes the average for the 871 last year. So, you know, again, it'll be interesting to see if 24 is the run rate, or if it's something a little bit higher, more like a 20, 19.
I think it'll be a little bit higher.
I think it'll come from the single family side or multifamily side.
I don't know much about multifamily, so
As we look down the table.
like I'm not, yeah. Single family, I think will be a little bit higher. People are getting used to the idea of the interest rates.
Right, yeah, I guess it's
I
no
think
longer
the
the
challenge
price
is gonna
shock.
be in the labor force, right? So rates
Right,
aren't
there's
gonna
only
go
so-
down.
yeah.
I think we all have to accept that. Cost to build is more, because the lack of labor becomes in effect with Micron and Meta taking, 1,800 out of the 2,200 locations in the valley. So I think that's gonna be a continued challenge. I think you'll see a lot of projects be shovel ready, just not able to go because there's just it just doesn't pencil yet. That's a challenge until somebody can build a new shiny toy in downtown and try to get rates up to then everybody can feel comfortable that we can pay over $3 a foot for it. So
But once Micron finishes, then we
it
basically
should
do that.
normalize again, right? And then obviously you should see the backfill of these supporting jobs. So there are a lot of companies that want to come here, right, to support this. Right now, the big push has been more Canyon County driven and because they want to be on the interstate, easy access. But I feel like we should probably see the residential side, kind of Columbia Village, Harris Ranch, I don't know where they go
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah, it's all built.
Yeah, but how do you draw
Anywhere along, yeah,
more,
easy access to
eastern,
the,
yeah,
to the
more
freeway.
east, not west, but
And that brought up my question, is how much space do we have left to continue to see the kind of growth we've been seeing? To, I think southeast, about the only spot, or not, the south, Boise.
So,
And that's one thing too, that when we get into the individual park planning areas, we'll see come out in the numbers, I think some of the growth assumptions that we had in our 10-year plan, certain of the areas, Central Bench in particular, were probably overly optimistic. Just because we're just not seeing the development. And there is opportunity for denser infill projects.
expensive.
Exactly. It's
Then we're gonna be
expensive,
looking at
and it's
all-
also a cultural shift, right? People are moving to Boise because they want single family homes and, they are fleeing some of the coastal cities. And they're used to like my micro apartment, I want something bigger and spacious, so. It'll be interesting to see if that can pick up a little bit, because again, just some of those local planning areas, with the exception of, so north is still doing all right, because there's so much land out there. And then southeast.
When is Micron supposed to be finished? So we're not having the electricians for the year.
Right, never.
And I've heard from Boise State that Micron is causing some significant cost increase because they're taking all their resources and building materials. And Boise State's trying to build some buildings and having a hard time doing that.
Have your children go into the trades.
Yes. All right, moving, this is like 7 to 10. That's interesting.
You didn't have that many, you didn't have 28 slides.
I did.
Are these missing? 8, 9.
Yeah.
We're not authorized to see this.
Do you want me to get out
Yeah,
of?
do you mind?
Oh,
No, that's weird, they're hidden. I don't know how to do that, but apparently I did.
You learned.
So-
Get it in this.
Right.
Yeah, this is my
Yeah.
video. Yeah. So on the permit trends, just in terms of number, it's, again, to what we were talking about on the prior slide, it's a decline probably to a new normal. Yeah, so, again, it's the same trend that we saw on the prior page where it's, there was the pre-COVID and there was the post-COVID. And although this slide is up also, from the, let's call it the 2010s, it's up a couple percent over the last few years as opposed to, you know, a quarter, you know, 25% or something like that on the residential front.
It would be question.
Yes.
Is it possible to break it out by new build on undeveloped land versus tear down and rebuild? Just wondering if
It's
that's.
probably possible.
It's possible. The interesting thing though is there's, because of the way impact fees work, tear down and rebuild, there's no impact fees.
Okay.
Unless it's changing.
Right. Okay. Right, yeah, I mean, if you tore it, or if you tore down like a single family to put up a multifamily, you have to pay for the additional units, but we can try to track that now, but I can tell you from looking at, for a long time, I looked at every single impact fee that we assessed, and demos were few and far between, and a lot of times when you see them, it was kind of a meaningless stat, because it was just what I was talking about, it was to tear down the old single family to put up, you know, a bunch of really dense townhomes, or even just like a 4-story apartment building.
Just wonder if we'll run into that more as time goes on, imagine.
Right.
As we run out of space.
Yeah, the other thing that we see too a lot is ADUs,
Yeah, that's gonna be more and more,
they're actually affordable.
yeah. A lot of people are buying properties with the idea that they can put something there to, you know, get some income.
Or as I experienced over the last quarter, someplace to put your mother.
Or your kids, you
Or your
can,
kids,
to, like your college age kids or.
Right. So on this one, I think the only thing that I note is just the value of Micron.
Yeah.
You know, you can see it was a rounding error before, I mean, not always a rounding error, but you know, without them, we were down 21%. With them, we were up 112%. And that's not 112% of budget, that's up 112%, so 2x, right? I mean, it's not insignificant. Let's see if I can get back to the,
Little icon at the bottom. No, there you go.
oh, scroll through, okay. So on the parks front,
I could sign there.
you like it?
I like that.
Tried to, you know, green for parks, blue for the police.
I like the overlay.
Oh, okay, yeah, and so yeah, so it tries to break out budget. And you can see that, you know, parks was both below budget and below the prior year. Whereas the opposite was true for, the fire and police collections. So again, I try to stay away from just reading the stuff that's on the screen and that was provided in the memo. But some of it I will touch on a little bit. So, you know, as we were talking about, the Micron fees were up significantly. So hence the outperformance of police and fire. And the other thing is the relative outperformance of the two. You know, police was a little bit greater because that tends to be more of the industrial classification, is a little bit heavier on police. Versus like a office space, which will be, or I'm sorry, versus like retail, which is pretty, it's more even, I think. But at any rate, you know, so when you look at budget, again, public safety was over, North River and Southeast were over budget. Every other park planning area, including regional parks, was below budget. And then of those, only public safety and River North were actually above the prior year levels. And so when looking out to next year, just again, it's hard to tell at this point in the year, but it looks like we're pretty safe on budget. The question is whether or not we'll ultimately be able to beat 2024. So this looks at, I got some more creative graphing for you. So this one, I just cross-hatched the areas that were over budget. And you can see that year over year, there was that 35% decline, and we were also only at 77% of budget. So again, hopefully multifamily can pick up a little bit, because that's a lot of what drives, especially the regional parks, since a lot of it's downtown. But also in Southeast, there's been a couple of big developments out there that help collections a lot when those kick in. So looking at specific projects, and again, all this was in the memo, so I don't need to run through it in great detail, but I can. So a couple things I noticed: the parks maintenance, that project has been canceled for the time being. Just the cost of the entire project of like developing this campus at the airport, it was gonna, house parks. But there was also gonna be, land that would be developed for other uses. It just became very, very expensive, and as everything else is getting more expensive to do, it's capital fund said, all right, well, we've got $5 million for a $100 million project, so let's put this one on ice for right now. Spalding Ranch is ongoing. I think there was 1.7, I believe, of budget for Spalding Ranch last year, of which about just under 900 grand of it continues in this year. They're working on, what is it this year? It's the tunnel lateral, right? And is it restrooms?
Restroom, wash station, internal paths.
Got it.
We're working on design.
Primrose is done. Stewart Gulch is done. However, and maybe an update on this one, there is a land donation that we found out about that was gonna just cost like $1,000 to do the paperwork for it, basically. So I don't know if that's come through yet or not, but, okay. But that was the only other thing left in that project. Southeast, we didn't have a new project. We were just restoring fund balance for Alta Harris, probably in 26. And Southwest and the West Bench had no projects.
And then the Alta Harris. We are working on it in fiscal year 25. With, yeah, no problem. And we'll continue.
Got it. So elaborating more on that point, in 25, we've got kind of the first phase of Alta Harris, which is kind of site work, parking lot, kind of the big
First
design.
phase, believe it or not, is mostly roadway improvements.
Okay.
At Eckerd, so that Eckerd.
Opportunity.
If you're familiar with the site, there's a steep grade difference between the road and the property. So it's roadway improvements, it's bringing utilities to the site, making sure there's water and power. And then the fiscal year 26 dollars would be used towards parking lot, pathways, restroom.
That's coming out of the regional
Correct.
side. Okay, correct.
This part is what would
And then a lot
follow.
will come out of the southeast.
In 26.
Okay.
Correct. So there was a couple trails that were in the budget. Alta Harris we spoke about. McDevitt continue to work on Spalding. There was a small amount for the parks equipment. And then there's also an investment in veterans. And both for veterans and McDevitt, there was small 17,000 of donation funding that was also added to the impact fee budget. So I don't know what we'll get out of there, maybe another couple feet of sod or something like that. And then, like I mentioned, for Primrose is done. It's just the reason why it's on this sheet is there's still some expenses, just closeout stuff that we had. Southeast, again, just the regional part that's being paid for. Southwest, we do have the volleyball courts going in, and of the 190, 150 of it is impact fees, and then 40 of it's coming from the city. And then on the West Bench, there's nothing coming out of that fund, but that is the location for McDevitt.
Question, for Fairview Park, with any equipment that's going in, was that already budgeted and paid for earlier?
That's city dollars.
City.
That's a maintenance and repair project that is a 30-year-old playground. We're trying to get into cadence of replacing our aging infrastructure. So we're asking for general fund dollars to do that.
And here is all of that information in graphical form.
Yay, that's my
love this.
favorite.
I know.
Love to have like a poster board that you brought every time, because every time I'm like, where's that broken?
And the only thing that's not on this is somewhere up over here, and it's not a parks fee, which is, or parks project, which is why it's not on there, is the, fire station 13. But you can see these are the two trails that we're working on. Was it one of them got started in 24? Okay. But they'll both be finished this year. Stuart Gulch Primrose, the ongoing stuff, Spalding. I think the rest of it is obvious. And to the extent that you want this sent around, like in an email, so you can actually see it in a larger format, I'm happy to do so.
Great, so I can put it in here.
Right. Moving on to fire. Again, I won't read off the screen to you, but it's basically the same story that we were talking about earlier, which is unlike parks, the Micron explosion, let's call it, really benefited fire and police collections. So you can see that it was up 53% year over year, and it was 183% of budget. Again, speaking of what a great forecaster I am. And then all the fees that we're collecting, and then some are going to be used for Fire Station 13, both the building and the engine that's going in that. And depending on how collections do this year, we might actually not owe the capital fund money, or less than $1 million. But again, with Micron, it's tough to know what's going to happen.
This was the part I really liked, because I remember when we put the plan together, and having negative balance for a number of years.
Right, yeah, I mean, before it was, until what collections actually were, 23 and 24 actually were okay. And yeah, I mean, it took it down from it was gonna be negative, basically until we got ready to build the south or southwest station. And, you know, then we're just gonna be paying that off for the next decade. But yeah, it looks a lot better now. So same story here. The only thing coming out of police right now is just that tiny bit of funding, the 5% that they're kicking in for the officer space at the new fire station. Obviously, police is not contributing to the fire engine. However, the other thing that is still, this was budgeted 3 years ago, and I think they're just getting around to ordering it, is the mobile command unit. So that is one of the things that will be paid for. I believe it's actually gonna happen in 25.
810,000.
Yeah.
More than that.
The plans and use category.
The impact fee funded debt for the command vehicle was, so it was a total of just under 600 grand, of which 500 is impact fees. And then 100 came from the city. And we'll see if we can actually write a. But they seem confident that we can.
What does a command unit look like?
Oh, you know, so I will send the map, and I will send a couple. A year ago, when we were talking about a small increase, like the inflationary increase for it. I actually had a picture of the type of unit we would be getting.
I must have missed that.
What do you think, glorified RV?
Okay,
The big bus looking thing.
Yeah.
On the side.
got it. Thanks.
But again, up 68% year over year, 216% over budget. Was that, oh, you pulled it up?
Yeah, I just.
And I'll see too, if I can pull it up after this, I'll, at least pass my laptop around the room.
Sorry.
So, now you all can ask questions. I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit. We're good with that. So if there are no further questions, I think I just move to this item.
I have a couple of questions.
Go for it.
So looking at police and then, can we go over the aging report?
We did not. I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, it looks good. Right now.
Yeah, the only thing.
Regional.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and regional's gonna be, I mean, you saw the list of projects this year, it's gonna be
Is there a
all the
change?
stuff we've currently collected.
I mean, we have plenty of time for police and fire, I guess. Like, balances are growing significantly, no planned expenditures.
And fire too, although it's growing, like this isn't kind of a pro forma analysis for what they're gonna owe for the remaining costs of Fire Station 13. So again, really, both of those are zero when you look at it at the end of this year.
Is there any future plans for, I guess, police at this point?
Yeah, so we're actually doing, we're doing some work on facilities planning, and that will inform where they're gonna need more, either substations, co-location, fire, or just a new standalone facility. But it's highly likely that's it.
They got some money to spend.
Right, and unfortunately, it's
Already
relative peanuts.
Yeah. And remind me if we can't move money from central bench to Northridge, right? That's not. Can't do that.
Isn't there stipulation on the timeframe that we have to use the money by? And with this massive influx, is that gonna be problematic to make sure we can get it all used?
Given that council has approved the Muriel Farms, all that acquisition, that's also gonna change the landscape for what we need for police facilities, as well as probably accelerate the need for a fire facility. So again, let's assume best case, we're flat at the end of the year, we've paid off Fire Station 13, and the fire balance is at zero. We're definitely gonna be, I mean, so let's say even we build for 5 years, to build up some budget to be able to, or some fund balance to be able to work on that south or southwest fire station. That will eviscerate that balance. I mean, unless, we have 5 more years like Mike Brown was this year.
Okay.
Well, this report was good. It was good for fire and police, not that great for parks. So I think that's worth noting. We're up 127%.
So my
Each area is, yeah, the parks are not, but the balance is still good. I did have one more question. I mean, looking at the annual impact fee FY24 year end, there's a side note at the bottom, it says balances and interest earnings exclude unrealized mark-to-market losses. Are these invested?
So
Balances?
yes, so basically it's, although all of it from an accounting perspective is broken out, there's basically like a giant pool of funds that the city invests, and some of it's cash, some of it's investments. And the relative breakdown to that is based on anticipated needs. So they go through and they look at based on the theoretical fund balance for each of the different funds. In this case, it would be Fund 405, the impact fee fund. They figure out, okay, well, they have X% of the overall city budget or balance, so that gets them X% of the revenues, but it also gets them X% of the gain or loss. The nice, typically, although I know that they're actually talking about one right now where we might realize a loss just to be able to reinvest the money at a higher rate. That might be changing now that inflation's apparently still being a little bit stickier than anticipated. But the nice thing is since we basically hold entirely fixed income investments, the mark-to-market stuff is largely meaningless.
Less than the value of my house.
Was that?
Less than the value of my house.
Well, I mean, and some of them aren't immaterial, it's just we'll never actually realize
Right.
either the gain or the loss, because we just hold it until maturity.
Right.
Because most of it's really short-term stuff, it's like 1 to 3 years.
Never realized it's invested. Smart.
Any other questions about the report? Can we get a motion to approve the report?
I move that we approve the FY 2024 impact fee annual report to the city council.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's approved.
All right, now I'll talk a little bit about 25 results and should probably be time if you wanna go get some water or something like that, take a break, because I don't know that any of this is actually meaningful. Just because who knows what's happening with Minecraft. But I tried to show, here's the budget, 6.5 million for this year. Where are we today in terms of collections? Where were we last year today as of collection, in terms of collections? And then what does that look like year over year on an actual to actual basis? So you can see like Micron is still driving large increases. But again, a lot of that's just because we weren't seeing the Micron stuff in early 24 and that really hit later in 24. You know, I would say that parks, obviously, again, 4 months into the year, 4 winter months into the year, it's hard to tell. But again, they're up year over year, so with the exception of Southeast. So that's probably, hopefully a good sign. And here, just a whole bunch more numbers that'll hopefully not confuse everyone, but I just want to show actuals, budget, and the year-to-date actuals again, and this was full year actuals for 24. So you can see, all right, well, if we say where we are right now is basically going to be a third of our collections, that's this column. Seasonally adjusted looks at patterns from the past 5 or 6 years. It says, all right, well, based on typical patterns, we're usually at X% of collections at this point in the year. That's the middle column. And then if we say, all right, well, 2024 at this point, we were at 10% of our ultimate collections for the year. So if we applied that same math to 25, we'd be at this number. I would be shocked if basically if that happens, again, just given the timing of Micron, it's inflating the first bit of the year and it wasn't inflating the first bit of last year. So again, that's why early on I said I feel pretty good about hitting 8 million as maybe a budget target for next year. But I think it'll have to be looked at as we get closer. Oh, and then the last thing, just sorry, on the color coding, if it's just green font, it means it's above budget. If it's all green, that means that it's above budget and above last year. And then red, it's the same thing, below budget and last year.
Sounds like you need to go study Micron very closely.
I know, it's, which
hard to-
unfortunately means I also need to study the Trump administration,
I was
because
gonna
that
say,
really like.
It's hard to study that because it's so seemingly erratic.
Right.
So how comfortable do you feel about that parks number? The total parks
For 2025.
the 3,000,006. Obviously.
I probably feel more, I think we'll be closer to budget this year,
Okay.
but it's probably something in the low 3s as opposed to, I would hope that we're better than this, but again, like just so much can happen over the course of the year. It's a matter of seeing like how much of this, what's going on in Washington has knock-on effects to government workers here, right? And just kind of overall economic health.
Question for Parks then. How is Parks feeling about the budget and having to move projects?
For fiscal year 25,
Yeah.
for the budgeted projects, we feel very good. We just go with what's budgeted. And then if we end up seeing, as we have been estimating pretty accurately, I will say, over the last 3 years, 2 years, 3.5. We probably put maybe 25 projects out to bid in the last 2 years, and our estimates have been good. So, I feel confident we'll be able to continue to move forward. We've been seeing increase in labor costs, but a decrease in some material costs, and I kind of wonder if that's just because there's more materials in general being shipped here.
Right.
But it kind of depends on the project, to your point about electricians. what the elements are and all that. But I don't see any major red flags for fiscal year 25 budgeted projects.
Yeah,
At
and
least
oh,
at
sorry.
things that we can control.
Right.
I mean, there's always that caveat. You do a much better caveat than I do about projecting.
Oh, just that I don't know what I'm talking about?
The tea leaves aren't coming out clear.
Very hazy. I need readers just to see stuff that's this close. I mean, looking out in the future, I'm blind.
I told the client day before yesterday, that generally I've been able to look 6 to 12 months out and have a pretty good sense of what's gonna happen. When I look out now, it's blank.
Right.
Just very difficult to know because so much is gonna be impacted by what happens in Washington.
And I think maybe to the one thing I would point out is if you look at the projections here, with the exception of fire, which we've talked about, and central bench, I believe are the only two where the planned uses in 25 even exceed the beginning fund balance. And central bench is just, we're still paying off Franklin. So that'll be paid off whenever we get the collections in to actually do that, hopefully this year, fingers crossed. And like I said, hopefully fire works out so that we're roughly flat at the end of the year.
Central bench doesn't look too good in your projections.
Was that?
The central bench doesn't look too good in your projections.
No, I mean, and if you look back historically, like just the growth assumptions, I think that were built into the plan are just overly optimistic because they don't coincide with, I mean, it takes account to the modern zoning code, which, you know, we haven't really seen the full impact of that yet. But I mean, looking back, I mean, their historic averages, I mean, there's year-to-year fluctuation, but I mean, it's less than 200. It's not the budgeted number of 400. It's, again, the pro rata amount that says, all right, well, if we're gonna get 6.5 million in collections, and here's the total for parks, police, and fire over that period. So this much goes to central bench. It's just wildly wildly optimistic. So that's one we'll definitely have to continue to feel our way along before we put new projects in the pipeline.
What I'm getting out of this, you're kind of expecting it to look a lot like this year, though. Fires and police are gonna be up significantly, parks down.
Yeah, I'd say hopefully, yeah, parks below budget but above this year.
Yeah.
And you cannot quote me
No other projections.
on that.
Oh, yeah.
So just, and here is the weirdest thing that I found, which just shows how much of a bubble, in my opinion, Boise is, because this doesn't reflect. Sarah, do you think 1.6%?
Remind me what those letters stand for.
Oh, it's the building cost index and the construction cost index. Because that has the skilled labor component as opposed to, I mean, that's really the main difference between the two. But I mean, Sarah, are you seeing your projects only go up by 1.6 per year? I know Sean, or not Sean,
It's
Lindsay
been
is.
so variable the last 2 years. I think I would say things have leveled a bit.
Oh, okay.
But in terms of an actual percentage point, I don't think I would be able to conjure that up without talking to my team. But it has, I mean, as I say to the point earlier about us feeling pretty good and confident that we'll be able to achieve, based on our staffing capacity and the money that we have budgeted for 25 projects that we have committed to within the scope that we have committed to them. It's because we have been estimating, you know, from a perspective of a more volatile environment.
So larger contingencies.
Yeah, just like, you know, what have materials been over the last 2 years and using that rather than what's the lowest we expect materials to be, just more of an average. So
Right.
that doesn't actually look too off the bat.
Yeah, I think, so what I haven't done yet, and part of it is I wanted to get your feedback. Sorry, it took me a second to figure out what was going on, so I'm back now. But no, like what we're gonna do for increases next year, because the last couple of years has been pretty easy, because honestly, the percentages, the index has given us have seemed pretty dead on. You know, I mean, could you have argued 13 was a bit high? Yes, but we also hadn't increased fees that much in a long time, so probably, I don't know, you know, it'll just be interesting to see what happens. And then the other graph that I included in here is, you can see that there's been a slight uptick, and that's continuing through, like, I think there's preliminary March numbers in there. It's just the way that they do it, like the results they get in February become their March number. But so you can see that there's still a slight uptick, so it might make sense to revisit this in a month and see if that trend's still continuing, maybe taking a little bit above the index this year. But I'd also get Public Works, just because they spend so many of our, you know,
Right.
actual building costs. I wanted to get their opinion too on what they're seeing, but the last I heard is they're still seeing 5 to 10%, because again, they're competing with the microns.
I mean, I don't disagree with the last graph. I don't think things got too much more expensive last year.
Okay,
I remember it's all cumulative too.
right.
Prices rose a lot. So they flattened out.
Yeah, and hopefully that is what we're seeing. Again, it's just how much is micron gonna throw that off, and
Well, I mean, the skilled labor.
right, exactly. Anything else on that one?
I think each month we make our inflationary adjustment usually.
It'll be next month, we'll probably, next month or the month, yeah, March or April we'll set it.
Okay.
So depending on what I learned from Public Works, it might be discussion in March, set in April.
Thank you.
Might not be able to make the next meeting.
Okay.
Commitment. I don't know if it's on this day. It is today, there is something today I miss, so same thing next month.
Last is, and if this is irrelevant, let me know, but I know there's a question, something about Southwest, and so between me and Parks, since I wasn't at the last meeting, I wasn't sure if it was more of a question of development plans, or if it was a question of what have we seen in collections, and what have we used the fees on? So just to answer the financial question, I can. You can probably ignore all the colors, those are just trying to show the months, so I mean, you can see it's, as we know, very, very sporadic. But in this period, we've collected about 2.6 million. We've spent about 1.5 there on Molinar, of which 1.4, sorry, the city has spent 1.5, and 1.4 of that came from impact fees. And then there's the other 150 this year that's yet to be used, and then you're left with, you know, the southeast balance of a couple $2 million.
Mike, are you with us?
Yeah, so just to confirm, there will be a surplus of funds for Southwest after the Molinar Park volleyball courts are completed, or did I misunderstand that?
No, you're correct. I mean, I think the starting balance for this year was, yeah, 1.1. So, and that's not even gonna use, well, it'll basically use the 0.1. So basically at $1 million pro forma plus whatever we have in collections.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Go for it, Michael, it's all yours.
Just out of curiosity, the funding that's left over, could that or would that be used to potentially go towards amenities or police and fire areas for Murillo? Because I know that's also in Southwest, correct? Or will be in Southwest? Is that on the?
Just, I can't see, is there a way I can see? Oh, she's down there.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, hey.
because I wanna make a note that Molinar Park is not fully developed.
Okay,
And so those impact fees currently are projected to build out the rest of Molinar Park. Based on our levels of service in the master plan. We still have tennis courts identified on the master plan that have not been built, as well as a basketball court.
okay.
So those funds are programmed for the completed build out of Molinar.
Is there a date that Molinar will be completed?
I hope that those impact fee funds that are identified for Molinar in 27 will complete the build out of the park.
And
Okay.
then,
That's how,
yeah,
That's the 1.25 million that I see in
Correct.
fiscal year 2027.
correct.
So that
Thank you.
Well,
so if things go according to plan, then that Southwest Planning Region should still have about 2.5 million in it after 2027, but that's based on our projection.
yeah, which we're not hitting, so it's not gonna be that high.
I'm trying to see if there's others. Like, plan. Let's see, we've got, looks like in the plan, there was a Coughlin Park. Let's see. what else was there?
Uriel Farm would not be.
Yeah, it would have been in the plan at that point.
Right. So it's not in the schedule yet.
Correct, yeah, just the next one was $5 million that we had out there and, probably sometime in the next, the 2030s for Coughlin.
We'll say it is kind of problematic to me that going back to Central Bench, we're projecting $441,000 revenue for this year. And we know that number is not correct. Or even historically, it's high. So it just inflates these numbers to where we know the money's not gonna be there. But yet we're showing the money's.
Yeah, and I think,
I go back to projecting the.
yeah, with
Hard projection.
and what the mismatch of like the, commercial versus residential development last year really highlighted was, because I mean, look, you could have a year where Central Bench is below projections, but I think what it highlights is, they are separate things we have to look at separately. And then moreover, I again just believe that the growth assumptions we had for Central Bench were just flat out too high, and that was just based on Compass numbers. That's what Ann used, so.
I know it's difficult to do, so.
No, I mean, right now, it's just that pro rata allocation to make sure we get the full amount collected over 10 years. But I think that you're right, the reality is we're not gonna collect the full amount over 10 years.
If I understand correctly, that will mean we will have to push out park development.
Correct.
Michael, do you have anything else about Southwest you want to ask?
No, thank you. And I have to run at 1 PM for another meeting, just as a FYI.
We're gonna be done.
Yeah, we lose the space at 1 o'clock.
Right.
I think, yeah, that was it. Great, I'm done.
All right, anybody have any more questions? Can we get a motion to adjourn?